That was very interesting. Now, with your journey, Arnis, you mentioned earlier how you all got started. Tell us a little bit of your personal story and how you personally met Mang Ben, and what was the impression? How did it all started, and the training with him? The good times and the bad times, and I know from memory that you spent a lot of time with Mang Ben, traveling as well, taking him home and so forth. We would love to hear your story about your journey with Mang Ben.
Well, the first time I met Mang Ben was actually at my first, I think that was my level 3 Lescas grading, when he was invited to observe the testing. And he was this quiet old guy. He'd just sit in the corner and watch everybody, sometimes nod, sometimes a little shake his head, then look somewhere. He's very quiet. And it's not that he was not one to like blow the room away with his personality. He was just quiet, confident, very observing. He observed everything, and I guess it was interesting for me in the sense that he only wanted to say something when he had something to say. Like he seemed like always just conserving his energy for that moment when he needs to use it. But his eyes were everywhere. So that was my first impression. Quiet, strong, confident old man who, it's like underneath all that calm he showed, it's like you could see that there's a lot of experience underneath. And I guess at that point in time, he also reminded my granddad, my grandpa. So, it was like that kind of connection. Uh, I got a few compliments from him after the grading, and such a small word, just a few small words from him were sort of like a sort of catalyst that wanted me to do more. It's like something
Must be inspiring as well to get even little compliments from let's
yeah,
let's let's be real. This is the man who founded the art,
yeah,
and
exactly.
for him to approach you and to give him his little words of wisdom to you, to
Yeah.
motivate you and to encourage you to do better, is
Yeah.
like something that other people
Yeah, I mean,
can just
I
actually
think
dream of.
I think if he told me I sucked that day, I bet you I might have been on a different path. But sabi niya, he said, "Oh, magaling ka na pala eh." And I'm like, I don't know how to deal with that. And I'm like, but not to let it get to my head. I was thinking, but I think I can do more. This is not the end of me. I think I still can do more. So, you get a little bit more inspired, and that was the first time I met him. And the second time, because at that point we were still the UP Lescas group, and we didn't actively train under him yet at that time. The next time we started having a relationship was when we moved on. Master Elmer moved to the States. He was already in the States at that time. And, being like a club without the head instructor, it was difficult to, I mean, it's nice to have your peers, you train with each other and all that, but it's nice to have a kind of guide and mentor around to, push you in the right direction or steer you right if you're going wrong. So at some point in time, we moved forward to the Grandmaster at the Marikina Sports Complex. And from there, that's where the relationship grew. He makes the trip all the way from Bacoor, Cavite. And that's, by bus, that's like 2 hours. And eh, going home, we'd finish the session sometimes at 8 p.m. And it's not really a nice time to go home taking a bus. So one of my tasks, since I was lucky to be able to borrow my dad's car, I take him home, and that was these conversations we'd have in the car on the way home, got pretty interesting.
I bet.
He was a quiet guy, so he doesn't really volunteer so much information. You gotta probe him. Uh, but one thing I realized about him, is that he's you know he likes being talked to, and not just about Arnis, because I guess the funniest things we talk about would be, uh, like one time I told him, Mang Ben, please put on your seatbelt. Where it's a long drive, and they just enacted this seatbelt law. And if we get caught by the police, then I'd have to pay a fine and get into trouble. Then he'd look at me, and then just tap me on the shoulder. We can take him. So I'm like, don't get me into trouble.
Was he ever like that during training? I mean, how was training like with Mang Ben when how does he manage students?
When it's training, it's training. He doesn't really joke around a lot, and he's very critical. It's like he doesn't want to waste energy or time on chit chat and on doing wrong things. So the second you make a mistake, corrects you, and then start again. That's where I was really impressed by his patience for clumsy students like us, where, I mean, I don't know if I should put this on the record, but in one of our training sessions, I consistently hit his thumb like 3 times in the drills, and each time he'd pause, rub his thumb, look at me, take a deep breath, and start again. By the 3rd time, he looks at me and says, that's great to do on the street, but not in training. So, I mean, the amount of patience he'd have for, I guess it could be a mark of the age already at the time, where he knows what it's like to go through being clumsy. He still remembers or something, or he just really built the patience, over time to teach students, to bring them along the path. So he and he'd sometimes just sit on his bench and watch us drilling. And if he doesn't like what we're doing, and you see he's not looking at you, you're doing wrong. He's like, he doesn't want to look at you. He does not want to see you. You're doing something wrong. So you have to constantly be aware of what he's, because if he's not paying attention to you, then it means you're probably not doing it right.
You mentioned earlier, John, that you would take Mang Ben home from training, and that would take you about 2-3 hours
Yeah, depends on the traffic.
average. 3 hours, 4 hours,
2.5.
2.5 going, but 2.5 going back.
Going back 2.5. Coastal road, not friendly.
Yes, Manila traffic is quite horrific. So, given those times, those precious times that you were with Mang Ben, I mean, not a lot of people can say the same thing, that they've had that opportunity with Mang Ben. But expound a little bit on those times that you were with Mang Ben inside that car, and what kind of conversations did he share? Anything, or in terms of the principles of Lightning Scientific, what was it like?
Pretty much whenever we were in the car, we were not really talking shop. He was more really talking about life in general, and not really talking in the sense that we'd have this flowing conversation. You ask a question, and he'll talk to you about it, and then mostly it's short, concise answers. And but sometimes there are these really ridiculous situations, like it comes for me, in my opinion, it comes from a man who enjoys the little things in life. Like, I guess at that stage in his life, you try to take enjoyment in whatever you can. Like, there was one time, one of the toll roads along the coastal road. So I rolled down my window to pay the toll, and this scent wafts through the window. Ang bango. That's what he says. Ang bango. That, it's really nice. And he's like, and I'm like, yeah. And then I see, it's coming from the cashier at the toll booth. And so I pay the toll, and there's contact. Our hands touch, and I tell him, her hands are soft. He looks at her. He says, why do only you get to touch her? So it's little things like this that it makes me feel like he enjoyed life. I bet even the older guys, his generation, have more stories to tell about him, and being younger and all that. But with him, we'd mostly talk about little things like how to choose sticks. And actually asked me, "Oh, do you meet any other martial arts, any other arnis styles? Or do you know how to counter this strike from this style?" Uh, he'd quiz me every now and then, even up to the time that he was no longer traveling to us. Every time we visited, he's got training on his mind. It's like he was always curious about where we were with our knowledge. And I think that was as a teacher, that's a great thing to have, as a teacher, of caring for your students.
That's a good sharing. I mean, I guess of all the principles that Mang Ben shared, in your own opinion, what do you think would be the most important one to understand, or especially for a person who just started their journey in Lightning Scientific?
Well, he appreciated hard work. If you're training hard, training correctly, he appreciated that. I mean, of course, he appreciated talent and strength and all that. But he does. If you're lazy, he loses interest watching you. He won't. It's like he won't waste time on you if you're. Because several of us are training, and if you're goofing off, he loses interest. He won't look at you. He'll focus on who's really working, and then go to them. So that's one thing I think I got from. I saw in him work ethic. When you're training, you're training. Don't goof off. Humor is appreciated, but not that it becomes disruptive. In the beginning, stick to the textbook before you go inventing techniques. Because from what he explained is, you still don't see the big picture. You know, learn the mechanics first before you try doing all sorts of applications with it. You know, so I guess the technical proficiency was paramount in his mindset, becoming technically competent before you start, showing off. The funny thing is, he appreciated creativity also, but if it was within the right principles. Like, for example, we love in demonstrations, we love doing a spinning jump with either a thrust or a smash. Now, a lot of people frown upon it, because in the sense that, okay, it's creative, but it's not really technical, in the sense that it's risky. But in one of the demonstrations, he spun. So what does that mean? I mean, didn't he just shatter all those assumptions? If the grandmaster can still be creative at his age, right? I mean, what does that show? That we shouldn't be close-minded. He was constantly also refining himself. Especially when he sees students with other backgrounds and other influences, and how they can enrich what he already has. He was not close-minded. So that's another thing that I feel that influenced me. That open your mind, room to grow. There's still room to improve, even at his stage and age.